Hello, how are you? This video is on how to match horoscopes, how to match birth charts. I think we all have the freedom to choose who our life partner is going to be and when we choose to marry. But through astrology, we can ascertain who that person might be and when might be the best time. By doing so, I think we'll avoid making our life tougher than it already is. We are all going through challenges of different kinds. So if we decide unthoughtfully, choose to marry the person perhaps not meant for us, and at the time not meant for us, there are only challenges ahead. If something can help us, if astrology can help us, then why not? Now, whatever challenges you are going to go through in life, in your married life, for example, you'd still have to go through them. But deciding through astrology, perhaps you can avoid making life worse. Whatever has to happen will happen, but we must try to not make things worse than what it's meant for us. Love is blind. I know we can't help ourselves and we decide based on emotion. But if we can, we must try to make the right choice and try to get married at the right time. Now, what do I see when I try to match birth charts? I try to assess the possible professional background of your life partner based on your chart. And then I also try to identify some personality traits. So once we've done that, you can then try to relate that to your partner. If the ruler of the 7th house in your chart, which represents one's life partner, is in the nakshatra Punarvasu, and Punarvasu's ruler is Jupiter in Ashwini, all of this together signifies that the partner can have a background in healthcare. So if your current partner has that background, then that's a good sign. A Mars Punarvasu like person in this example is going to be someone who is very caring, very accommodating, very protective. So some broad personality traits might also help you identify if you're making the right choice. That's the first thing that I see, that the professional background and personality identified from your chart is matching the other person, your partner's background. Matching of time of marriage is a very important exercise. It gives you a black and white answer. For example, if a couple is in their 20s, one person, a man in that relationship, has many combinations for late marriage. So it's likely the man is going to marry after the age of 30, but in the case of women, the woman partner, she might marry in her mid to late 20s. So the time of marriage does not match. The life journey the couple was meant to have in their lives is different. And I have found this to be the most important exercise I do. You might be very compatible with someone. You might feel I'm having the most amazing time. But if your life journey is going to be different, then you are not going to be together. So it's not only about compatibility. Maybe you found a partner who matches the professional background your chart is suggesting your partner might have. He has the personality similar to what your chart is suggesting your partner might have. But if the time of marriage does not match, then that's the wrong decision. I have, for that reason, posted a very detailed video on the YouTube channel on time of marriage. If you have the time, you can learn more about combinations for late marriage and how to assess or identify or determine the time of marriage. So that is very critical. Time of marriage should match. The third thing I see is the association of malefics with one person's marriage house. What that signifies is that person might go through challenges. What I mean by that is, if Saturn, Ketu, Rahu and Mars are linked to the house of marriage in some ways, it's likely you're going to encounter some challenges. With Saturn, there's going to be lateness in marriage. With Ketu, there can be that you prefer independence, and that becomes a concern in your relationship, as you find, oh, whenever I'm in a relationship, I feel I'm losing my individuality. With Rahu comes indecisiveness, and the person may also be attracted to unconventional relationships which do not conform to societal norms, and therefore you have to overcome that pressure from the society to build that kind of a relationship. And with Mars comes excessive competitiveness. Competitiveness is great if you're in a job where you'd like to be better than your co-workers, but in a relationship with competitiveness can only be counterproductive. It only leads to arguments. So if you have Saturn, Ketu, Rahu and Mars linked to the 7th house, ideally your partner should not have such combinations. So if one person's chart is indicating some difficulty in married life, the other person's chart ideally should not have that. But in most cases, I have seen that people do have malefics associated one way or the other with the house of marriage. That's the practical situation. That's the practical example. So in that case, if both of them, the couple planning to marry, in their charts have seen that there are malefics linked to their chart, then I identify when in the future would they be going through those difficult dashas. The example here, let me explain this through an example. In the first person's chart, I see Saturn in the 7th house and Rahu aspecting it. I identified in the year 2029, from March all the way till April 2031, the person would be going through Saturn and Rahu's Mahananta Dasha. So it's very likely during that time, given the nature of Saturn and Rahu and their association with the house of marriage, the person is going through difficulty in one's married life. Now, the other person has Ketu in the 7th house, in the Navamsha chart. So I'm doing an advanced analysis. So if we understand a complex example, we'll be able to do a simple, we'll be able to assess simpler cases. Now, Ketu in the 7th in Navamsha, around the time in 29 to 2031 that I'd mentioned about person 1, person 2, let's say, starting Ketu's Mahadasha. Now, both of them, during that time, this 2-year phase, March 29 to April 2031, both of them together would be going through a difficult dasha. They have malefics linked to the house of marriage, and there would be a time in the future when both of them would be going through a difficult dasha, which would have an adverse effect on their married life. So sometimes it's fine that two people have malefics, they come together, but the dashas don't match. What I'm saying here is difficult dashas are not common. Or, let me explain that better. Time phases when the person would be going through a difficult time, difficult dasha related to married life, if it's not common, then it's still okay. It's still okay. If in the example I have taken, Saturn and Rahu, if one person was going through that, but the other person started Jupiter's Mahadasha, for example, and Jupiter was aspecting the 7th house, then it might be the case that even though the first person is going through some challenge, the second person is helping the other person deal with those challenges. So this is another important exercise that one can do through astrology to see what lies ahead. I have posted a video on the dashas on this channel. If you're interested, you can go through it. Now, the 5th thing that I do. The third and the fourth was linked to malefics and the dashas of those malefics. Now the fifth is Guna Milap. This is a methodology used by Vedic astrologers to match horoscopes. Here we are only looking at the compatibility of your moons. Nadi dosha, the first parameter, it's assigned 8 points, is based on your moon's nakshatras, the compatibility between your moon nakshatras. If there is a Nadi dosha, the moon nakshatras are incompatible, then this can lead to the couple unable to start a family. Bhagut dosha takes into account your moon sign positions. If one person has their moon sign as Aries, the other person has their moon sign as Pisces, then it creates a 212 Bhagut dosha. In my experience of reading charts, I've seen this 212 Bhagut dosha. Why is it 212? From Aries, Pisces is 12 places away, and from Pisces, Aries is 2 places away. Pisces and Aries. Count 2. And from Aries, if you count all the way till the 12th sign, the sign of Pisces, it will be 12. In my experience of reading charts, this 212 Bhagat dosha leads to physical distance in the relationship. One person has a job in New Delhi, the other person is going to Canada for studies. There's distance now. The other person has found a full-time job in Canada. The first person cannot relocate to Canada. It creates an issue. Physical distance creates an issue if there's a 212 Bhagat dosha. The 6-8 Bhagat dosha has to do with lack of understanding, and also a couple might experience dramatic events together. If one person's moon sign is Leo, and let's say the other person's moon sign is Capricorn. So from Leo to Capricorn, it'll be 6. And from Capricorn to Leo, it'll be 8. And 6 and 8 positions, respective positions of the moons, is likely to lead to challenges. The 6th and the 8th house in our birth charts are houses linked to challenges. Challenges can be in terms of health. One person's chart is bringing that energy in the other person's chart, which has an adverse effect on that person in terms of health. It can lead to money issues. It's not ideal to have your moon signs 6, 8 from one another. This can be mitigated to some extent if the moon sign ruler is the sign of Aries. So in that scenario, if moon is in the sign of Aries in one person's chart, the other person has moon sign in Scorpio, even though this is 6 and 8, the sign ruler is Mars, so it acts as a mitigating combination. The other Bhagat dosha, which is not as severe as the ones I've mentioned, 212 and 6-8, is 5-9. If moon signs are placed 5-9 from one another, and if that dosha is there, it again is linked somehow to birth of a child, as the 5th house is linked to birth of a child. But my opinion is, if there's no Nadi dosha, then I don't look at this 5-9 dosha too seriously. Now Gana dosha is based on the nature, the temperament of the nakshatra your moon was occupying at the time of birth. So it is directly linked to mental compatibility. Under adverse situations, people act differently. Some people act in a way which is more forgiving, whereas some people act in a way, oh, I don't want this, and I'll get back at you for this and what you've done. So temperaments have to be matched, and that is assessed under Gana dosha, that's linked to your moon nakshatra. Graha dosha now is studying the friendliness of your moon sign ruler. One person has their moon sign in Capricorn, the other person has moon sign in Leo. The moon sign rulers now are Saturn and Sun respectively, and given the unfriendliness of these two planets, this leads to Graha dosha, which would lead to mental incompatibility. The couple in our current example might feel, oh, you are questioning my authority, or you don't listen to me. The other person might feel, I'm trying my best, but you have this you want this excessive control. Something on those lines, some challenges would be there. These are the first 4 in Guna Milap that I study very carefully, and they are assigned the maximum amount of points. There are other parameters too which you can go through. I'm going to open the match calculator on Far Far Away, so you can enter your details, that of your partner, and study this. The point I'd like to make here whilst assessing Guna Milap is that even if the compatibility score is very high, the first 2 things should make sense. The first one was seeing if the other person is similar to what your chart is suggesting in terms of personality and professional background. That has to make sense. Secondly, even if you get a full score on Guna Milap, if the time of marriage do not match, it's still incompatible in my view. Still there's no future in my view. You must understand the scope of analysis for different things I've shared with you. The scope for Guna Milap is limited to studying the positions of moon. It does not take into account the Dashas, your individual life journey, and what your chart essentially overall is suggesting who your partner might be. So you must take that into account. So high score does not necessarily mean great match. It's a good sign. It doesn't mean it's a great match. I hope that is clear. And similarly, a low score doesn't also necessarily mean it's a bad match. It's not a great sign, but maybe you were meant to be with that person. The time of marriage makes perfect sense. He seems to be that person, he or she seems to be that person. Your chart is suggesting you might attract. So you have to take all of that into account. The 6th analysis that I study for a couple is Synastry. Now we are superimposing one person's chart on the other person's chart, and we see how these interactions play out. If one person has Mercury in the sign of Libra, and the first person has Venus in the sign of Libra, then we have a Mercury-Venus synastry forming in their relationship, which can lead to both of them having a very friendly bond. It could be friends coming together and marrying one another. It can also lead to a business partnership together. A lot of friendliness will be seen in the relationship. Similarly, if there's a Sun-Saturn synastry, one person's Sun is falling over the other person's Saturn, there's likely to be authority issues. If there's Mars-Venus synastry, there would be instant mutual attraction to one another. If there's Venus-Rahu, this can lead to attraction, but in the extreme, where one person is very interested, which would be that Rahu person. If Rahu, let's say, is in the sign of Scorpio and the other person has Venus in the sign of Scorpio, this synastry would lead to the Rahu person being excessively interested in that Venus person. If there's Ketu related synastry, it can lead to a past life bond. If, let's say, one person has Sun in the sign of Pisces, the other person has Ketu in the sign of Pisces, this could lead to the couple having some sort of a past life relationship, which might play out in this life in a way that the Sun-like person is meant to be that Sun person in that Ketu person's life due to a past life association. So a Sun-like person would have to play the role of a caretaker or perhaps a fatherly figure in the life of that Ketu-like person. So different combinations lead to different meanings, and that is what is assessed through synastry, which might help you, the strengths and weaknesses, what might happen, what kind of chemistry might play out. That is the idea. Chemistry through synastry. That is the analysis, the 6th one. The 7th thing I see in assessing horoscopes is the practicality. The most important question is wanting to start a family. So you study the condition of the 5th house and you see if the person has a strong 5th house or not. If there's the position of Saturn in the 5th house, then it's very likely you're going to be a parent late in life. Or if there's Ketu, it may also be a possibility that you yourself do not want to start a family, or there are circumstances which don't allow you to have that responsibility in life. Not always, but this is where you need to expertly analyze your chart to assess the strength of the fifth house. Now, if one person has a fifth house which isn't very strong, and the person he wants to marry wants to start a family, and that's very important for that person, then this is a mismatch for practical reasons. One person may not be able to start a family, or does not want to start a family for whatever reason. So if the couple coming together, they want to start a family, they must have at least not weak planetary positions in the fifth house. That is the practicality you can assess. The other question related to practicality is wanting to settle away from one's home country. If one person has many combinations which are suggesting that person's life in a place foreign, but the other person does not have those combinations and perhaps does not desire to go away, but the couple thinks that maybe they'll work things out, but this can lead to impracticality later on. So practical circumstances have to be studied. The other one that I get asked very often is the relationship with the in-laws, and that you can study by understanding planetary positions linked to the 8th house. Again, if Saturn, Ketu are there, or Mars is there, there's likely to be a difficult relationship that you might have with your in-laws, and therefore if you are planning to live with your in-laws, then it's going to lead to difficulty. So you can assess certain questions that you might have about your future with someone, and if it's making practical sense, you can decide more thoughtfully. I'd like to now share the methodology and how you can assess who your partner might be from your chart. I'm sharing the methodology. You'll have to do this analysis by yourself. So what you should do is identify the ruler of the 7th house, study its nature. If the ruler of the 7th house is Saturn, on the blog of Far Far Away, the first article on basics, you go through the nature of Saturn. You are going to attract a Saturn-like person. Then go one step further, study where Saturn is placed in your chart. If Saturn is in the nakshatra of Pushya, when I say where is it placed, you identify its nakshatra. If Saturn is in Pushya, for example, it's very likely your partner could be possessing a personality belonging to a professor. Could actually be a researcher, Saturn in Pushya. Actually, this isn't the best example, as Pushya's ruler is Saturn. A better example could be Saturn is found in Purva Falguni. Let's say that is what you have identified. So in that case, the partner can be in a profession which can be linked to risk management, the finance sector. Purva Falguni is directly linked to that. And in terms of personality, the person might be someone who is very serious when it comes to pleasure. Like you go to a fun park, everyone's laughing and having a good time. This person is very serious and isn't really enjoying or letting himself go. Like in a party, you always notice people standing in the corner. That's a very Saturn Purva Falguni like person. The reason why I said Saturn Purva Falguni is a better example, because Purva Falguni's ruler is Venus, so we also have to study Venus's position. In the first example, Saturn Pushya, Pushya's ruler is Saturn, so our analysis was limited to that. This is a more complicated example, and therefore I wanted to take that example, Saturn Purva Falguni. You must also then study Purva Falguni's ruler, which is Venus, and its position in your chart to fully understand what that planetary position means and what that could mean as to who your life partner might be. The same you must do with the sign position. So you have identified Saturn's nakshatra, then you identify Saturn here is an example. The example of the 7th house ruler. Now Saturn sign position, then you study the sign ruler's position. Then you study Saturn's position in the Navamsha, and you study its sign and its sign ruler in the Navamsha and in the main chart. So what you're doing is simply trying to understand the position of the ruler of the 7th house. You must not ignore the house positions. The house the ruler of the 7th house is occupying in the main and the Navamsha. That would give you an idea of the quality of married life. If you find the ruler of the 7th house in the 6th, 8th or the 12th house, there is likely to be some challenges. You must do the same exercise for the Dara Karak. The Dara Karak in one's chart is the planet holding the lowest degree. So you identify its nakshatra and sign, and then you try to make sense of that, and then you try to also fully understand that position by studying the nakshatra ruler and the sign ruler, and you study the Dara Karak's position in the Navamsha. You study its house position, its sign and its sign ruler, going back to the main chart. This methodology on how to read a birth chart I've shared in one of the videos on this channel. Apart from this, you can do a more generic analysis, study Venus's position, particularly for a man. Venus represents a wife, so you must study how Venus is placed. In the case of women, it's Jupiter, so you must study how Jupiter is placed, follow the same methodology. And lastly, I also read the position of the ruler of the 7th house in the Navamsha. See, the 7th house is linked to marriage. So you should try to study as much as you can related to the 7th house. So I identify the ruler of the 7th house in the Navamsha. I see its position in the main chart. I see its position in the Navamsha and try to add that information to my study so far. That study and analysis would help you identify who your partner might be. You could also do some additional analysis by checking if the ruler of the 7th house, the Dara Karak, Venus/Jupiter, and the ruler of the 7th house in the Navamsha, is it in conjunction with planets like Rahu, which can lead to your partner being foreign to you. And I have shared some combinations related to partner being foreign in one of the videos, so you can do this study. Well, I understand love is blind and we can't help ourselves, but if we can help ourselves, we must try to make the decision thoughtfully. If astrology can help in any way and we believe it can help us, then we can make this decision based on astrology. I think it's the wise thing to do. I am now opening the match calculator for every user. You can simply go to the URL, enter your details, and you will get a Guna Milap based compatibility test and results, which is based entirely on your moon's position in your charts, you and your partners, and Synastry. But keep in view, this is just an indicator. The full analysis and the methodology I have shared with you in this video. I hope you found it useful. If you have any questions, please post a comment, and if you'd like to stay in touch, please subscribe to this channel. Thank you again. Bye for now.